What's happening, everybody? I'm Steve, and welcome back to Junkdrummer TV. This episode has been a long time coming. I had planned on doing it since I started the channel, and it is time. These are my top 10 plus one favorite drummers of all time. These are the drummers that I have listened to the most. These are the drummers that have influenced me the most. These are the drummers that made me want to become a musician. Damn them. And these are the drummers that have influenced my playing the most over the years. So I'm not going to rank them because who am I to rank all of these greats? It would be arbitrary at best, and I'm just not into it. So here we go. Top 10 plus one favorite drummers of all time. First out the box, the guy who made me want to be in a band. If you've watched my videos before, you've heard me say Phil Collins made me want to play drums. Dave Grohl made me want to be in a band. When Nirvana Nevermind came out, I actually saw the world premiere on MTV of Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I spent that whole weekend glued to MTV to watch that fucking song as many times as it was aired. It was the moment that I knew what I wanted to do, and I think that's a real common story for people of my age group. I'm a Gen Xer. They are our Beatles. Nirvana came and with a sickle of death came and just mowed down and destroyed all of that hair metal bullshit that came before. And Dave Grohl was at the center of it. I was already a big Rush nerd. I was like the stereotypical comic book, sci-fi, fantasy novel reading Rush nerd. And Rush, to an 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old junior high kid, is impossible. It seems impossible. But when Dave Grohl came, I thought, now that's something that I can do. That makes me feel all the things, and I could do that. And to this day, there are concepts that Dave Grohl does that I use, and I've used them in every possible playing situation, from bands that sounded like music for the Misfit Toys, to straight rock bands, to power pop bands, to female-fronted, kind of Nico Case sounding band that I'm in now. I have used the things that Dave Grohl taught me in 1991. I still use them to this day. So Dave Grohl, mwah. The next drummer, obviously, every time I do a video, there is a black pit bull that sits right there, and her name is Bonham, and it's John Henry Bonham. Of course it is. Has there ever been a top 10 drummer list that he's not been in? And if so, I want to know that person. It's John Bonham. There's not much more that I can say about him. I got turned on to them through MTV. Man, MTV used to be a great thing back in the day. It turns you on to music. I told this story in my Bonham video. Actually, every drummer on this list except two I've done videos for, and I will link them. Is it here or here? But anyway, they were celebrating the release of the box set, which was, the box set that had the crop circles on it. And I think the very first thing that I saw, and this would have been right around the time I got into Nirvana as well, in that same time frame, I think the first song I heard was Over the Hills and Far Away. I think that might have been it. And it was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. I mentioned before, I was a big fantasy novel reader when I was a kid. And it sounded like that. And then, you hear the other songs where they talk about Mordor from Lord of the Rings, and it was just everything that I wanted to hear at that time. And John Bonham was, again, huge influence. I steal his shit regularly. John Henry Bonham. Next on my list, the Professor, Neil Peart. Of course. I've done 3 videos on him. He was my first drum god. I discovered him before anybody. If you go watch the In Memoriam video that I did, and I will link all 3 of those in this section, I talk about how the one drummer in my small little rural town that I grew up was a huge Rush fan, and he turned me on. His name was Jimmy, and I became obsessed. But again, at the age that I was at, and had only been playing drums in school, in band, and the things that I heard from him at that time sounded impossible, unattainable, like a thing that mere mortals cannot even touch. As I got older, later on, I was able to, play a bunch of that stuff. But as I said in all those other videos, I use Neil Peart consistently because he's the greatest composer of drums. Him and Dave Grohl has this same thing going on. You can get rid of all of the music and just listen to the drum part, and you can follow the song. And I use that concept in every playing situation I've ever been in. Neil Peart. Okay, so this one may be a lesser known drummer, but those of you know, it's Billy Martin from Medeski, Martin and Wood. He is unlike any drummer that you've ever heard. He's super funky. He's got that New Orleans rounded funk sound, but he's also got a bunch of Brazilian and Afro-Cuban stuff in his playing and a shit ton of jazz in his playing. And Medeski, Martin and Wood, along with another band that's going to be on this list, is, in my opinion, one of the few newer acts, and I know that there are new jazz bands that I don't know about, but they were the bands that were moving jazz along and divorced jazz away from the tyranny of the mighty soloist, because Medeski, Martin and Wood has this very unique collective improv. They do solos where, supported solos, but it's this more collective improv of these three guys who've been playing now for, I think, over 25 years. And Billy Martin, if you've never heard Billy Martin, you stop this video and go watch Medeski, Martin and Wood, because he is a conjurer of moods and still plays intellectually, but is funky as shit and makes you just want to dance. That being said, they also do have a lot of avant-garde stuff that sounds like they're trying to rip your head off, and I love that stuff too. But Billy Martin, I can't really do too much of what he does. With the first three drummers, I can do a lot of that stuff, and I use it. Billy Martin is someone I wish I could be more like, but I am at a talent deficit to get to his level. Plus, I use his drumsticks, which I think are now discontinued. Regal tip, what's the deal? Billy Martin. Okay, if you watched the video I did, you know that Pantera is my all-time favorite metal band, and Vinnie Paul is my all-time favorite drummer. Yeah, there's a lot of drummers that came after him that play more technically, that play more fast than he does, but he's got the best groove of any metal drummer ever, and I am a groove junkie. Everything he does, or did, man, it's sad, everything he did was just badass, to the wall, groove-oriented metal, and Pantera will always be my favorite metal band. I said it in that video. All of my students come in and they show me the metal bands they're into, and I inevitably will do the whole, that's cool, that's awesome, let's listen to Pantera, and I think you're going to love them too. Vinnie Paul, please go check out the video I did on him, because there's a story time at the end of that video that is probably my favorite all-time story that I have on a first-person basis, watching him interact with his fans. And that alone should make you love him. But more than that, his just badass drumming. Now, I'm not a double bass player, and the metal band that I'm in isn't that kind of metal band, so I don't really do too much about Vinnie. I don't really do too much of Vinnie Paul stuff, but that's fine, because I listen to Cowboys from Hell, and Far Beyond Driven, and Vulgar Display of Power on a regular basis. Vinnie Paul. And now for something completely different. If you can tell from my accent, I am from the South, and I grew up with a father who loved outlaw country and Southern rock. And this is a little bit of a cop-out because it's two drummers, but they worked as one entity. It's Butch Trucks Jmo of the Allman Brothers. I love the Allman Brothers. I used to be in the jam band scene, and the jam band that I was in, we used a lot of that stuff. They are the ultimate dual drummer threat. They play together. They have these distinct roles, and there was just a lot of love in their playing because you could just tell there was just so much respect. They played together for fucking 40 plus years. And, Butch always was kind of the guy that laid down the solid groove. And Jmo was always the salt, pepper, and spice and Old Bay. He was the stuff that was always the added ingredients to the thing. Now, obviously, later on, Mark Quinones was the third drummer. And I got to see that iteration of the Allman Brothers, the Warren Haynes era, and they're just so powerful. Also, I got to see them the only time they ever did a clinic. They did a clinic in PASIC, at the PASIC in Nashville in 96 or 97. And when those three at the time played, it was truly an example of a thing that was greater than its parts. Butch Trucks Jmo. Man, I hear you, Grateful Dead fans. Sure. Butch and Jmo. That's how you do double drumming. And that's also how you do collective improvisation. The thing about the Allman Brothers where they were always trying to get to that note, hitting the note. Allman Brothers fans, you know what I'm talking about. Butch Trucks and Jmo. Tony Williams, baby. Tony Williams. He is the reason I finally got jazz. In the video on Tony Williams, I talk about how I was in music school, and, when you're in music school, you're supposed to like jazz, because that's how music school works. But I wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting it at all until I heard 7 Steps to Heaven. And I know this track I don't think is on there, but that was the record that really turned me on to what jazz could be. But then the track Pinocchio, that track, it blew my head up. It shattered my brain because I did not know that drums could be played like that. I always think of Tony Williams like in like sharp edges. He was just like a razor sharp katana blade. He was a ninja. Everything he did was so crisp and so perfect. And he distilled Max and Elvin and Art, but made it more precise. And just the things that he did. And, my favorite stuff of his, obviously Lifetime later, but my favorite stuff of his is the Jackie McLean record he's on and all the Miles Davis stuff. It's just what jazz was supposed to be. It seemed like all of jazz was building to that quintet. And in my opinion, all of these drummers were setting the stage, and Tony came in and cleaned the table. And he took all of that stuff and just, and when he was with Tony, it's a lot of things a lot of people don't realize. When he first got with Miles, he was 17. He was 17 and he was redefining the instrument. I can't do anything that Tony Williams does, so he's not so much of an influence on my playing. But I will say that when I feel that I am in a creative funk, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, and I'm just not happy with my creativity, I use Tony Williams and Billy Martin too. I use those as like creative steroids. Like, it fills me with ideas because he was so just, the drums were like this. There was nothing that Tony Williams couldn't do on a drum set at any time. If someone put a gun to my head and had to say, and was telling me, I want to know who you think is the greatest drummer of all time, I never want to say it. because who am I to say it? But I would probably have to say Tony Williams. Okay, so this is probably the least known on this list. Dave King of the Bad Plus. I think of him as kind of like a cousin of Billy Martin, and Bad Plus as a cousin of Medeski Martin Wood. They're both piano trios. Medeski Martin Wood, of course, they do more plugged in, and Bad Plus does all acoustic. Dave King is a maniac. He's a fucking lunatic. He's a crazy person, and it's beautiful. He does things on the drum set. He, in my opinion, has taken it to a whole other level. And I hate that cliche. I hate it. Ugh, hate it. Billy Martin has a lot of, more like tradition in his playing. He's big into sambas and a lot of New Orleans style second line type stuff. Dave King plays like a loon. It's insane. I've seen them 2 or 3 times. And like one time he was like playing, and there wasn't a way for him to get a sound that he wanted at his disposal. So he was like playing, and it would go, and was using, raking his fingers on the snares underneath, and in perfect time and in perfect melody with what was going on. And the thing that he does that a lot of drummers, jazz drummers, won't do, Billy Martin sometimes won't even do it. Dave King is a jazz drummer that will give you bone-crushing grooves, much to the dismay of a lot of the jazz intelligentsia who tries to tell you what is and what isn't jazz. Dave King will sometimes just play like Bill Ward, and it's awesome. And one other thing, the Bad Plus is moving the jazz movement forward more than just about any band that I know of anyway, because they're taking pop songs of the day and doing jazz versions of it. Now, that's a thing that's as traditional as Someday My Prince Will Come, except they're doing it with, like, Tears for Fears songs, and it's fucking awesome. If you don't know Dave King, turn this video off now and go check it out. Obviously, Danny Carey. Danny Carey. I've done 3 videos on him as well. There's not much more I can say about him. He's the master of the devil's arithmetic. He is one of the rare breed of proggy type drummers that plays a lot of math, that plays a lot of virtuoso stuff, that still does it with soul. That's the big difference between between Danny Carey and a lot of his ilk. Is a lot of his ilk, you can tell that they have the equations going on, and and it's very square. It's great, but it's square. Danny Carey is conjuring demons, and he does it in a soulful way. He is able to play in like 17/16 and still make it groove like mad. All of those Danny Carey wannabes have not been able to figure out how to play with the soul that Danny Carey has. And I figured this out through talking through an idea I had at the end of this last Meshuggah video. One of the reasons that I love listening to Tool and Danny Carey is because I don't know what the fuck he's doing half the time. So I can shut off my analytical brain, my drum teacher, drum analysis side of my brain, because I don't fucking know what's going on most of the time, and I can just listen like a fan, and it's a joy. And Danny Carey will always give me that joy. Danny Carey. And now the guy who made this a top 11 list, because I couldn't leave him off. I couldn't leave those other guys off, but I couldn't leave off Jean Paul Gaster of Clutch. He might be lesser known to a lot of you. In the area that I live, they rule the planet. I've seen Clutch 7, 8, 9 times. Jean-Paul Gaster is the man, and I did a video on him, and in that video, and I'll reiterate it now, this is the best way I can describe what Jean-Paul Gaster means to me. If Led Zeppelin were to ever get back together, and don't get me wrong, Jason Bonham did a fucking phenomenal job on Celebration Day, but Jason is a different drummer than John. Different generation. Jean-Paul is the closest thing that we have to John Bonham. And if Led Zeppelin were to ever get back together, and if they wanted to do it right, they would get Jean Paul. Clutch has never made a bad record. Jean Paul Gaster, from the very first time I heard Shogun Named Margus, all the way to, what's that new record? The new, I Wanna Be President. I can't think of that song. Shake Hands. The new song. From that very first record to this new one, he's improved and gotten better every record. He is a craftsman. Jean Paul is a craftsman of the drum set. If you don't know Jean Paul Gaster, turn off this video and go check it out now. And finally, he had to be the last. I've said it on multiple videos. He's my favorite drummer of all time, Mr. Levon Helm. He is my everything. Levon Helm is my everything. I play more like him, or try to play more like him, than any other drummer. His playing speaks to me on a Southern DNA cellular level. It doesn't hurt that he's the greatest singing drummer. Don Henley, I hear you. You ain't Levon Helm. And I think Don Henley would say that too. Phil Collins, obviously. No. Levon Helm is my all-time favorite drummer. And if you notice, he's probably the least technically proficient drummer on this list. But I don't give a shit, because his groove is beautiful. His touch on the instrument was just, no one had touched drums like that in like that rock setting. When you hear him play, you're hearing all those years that he was on tour with Hawkins, with Screaming Jay Hawkins. Is it Jay Hawkins? One of the Hawkinses. Damn it, I'm getting this wrong. But when he was a member of the Hawks, and then he played at the beginning of the Bob Dylan Electric era, you're hearing tens of thousands of hours on the instrument. The way that he played crush rolls, the way that he would play drum fills and not give you this big obnoxious crash. Everything about Levon Helm is perfect. And one of the best things about the tragic end of his life is he ended his life with two of the best records of his career, Dirt Farmer and Electric Dirt. Thank you, Larry Campbell, for making that happen. Levon Helm, my all-time favorite drummer. So, there you go. I will in the future do more categorized lists, like I'll do my favorite jazz drummers and my favorite prog drummers and metal drummers and rock drummers. But that was my all-time favorite top 11 list for now. So I'll also be doing my first live stream on Monday, and please won't you all join me, and we'll talk about this list, and we'll talk about your lists. We'll talk about drums and music and what we've been doing during the quarantine. You know, no big whoop. So thank you all. I'll see you next time, and keep practicing until it's easy.